Yo guys, Kota here. Today, I'm going to be doing the dungeon guide that I said I'm going to be doing. This is a full and slightly incomprehensive dungeon guide. I might forget some things. I'm going to be going through each role and each class and basically telling you what they do and what you should get for them between floors 1 to 7. And I'm going to be telling you some tips and just things I learned along the way in dungeons to try and help you guys out, because there are some things that even like cats of 50s don't know about, and there are some things that a lot of people actually might not know about, because these are things I learned from experience rather than like from a guide or anything. Some of these I actually like had to do a bit of research on because I either skipped the stages of the game or I didn't play that class. So yeah, but I'm still going to be going through it with you guys. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start off with Archer. So if you're interested in playing Archer, very good class. You do a lot of damage. Your job is basically to shoot things with a bow from a distance. That's it. You're going to want to start off in F1. The F1 and entrance are basically the same thing. Like you're going to need the same gear for both of them, just to clarify. Okay, so for F1, you're going to want a dragon shortbow, which is reforged on Hasty. Now, the reason for this is essentially you want the most crit chance you can get when you're very early starting off into dungeons. And the dragon shortbow is pretty much gonna help you get a lot of damage, and also it's a shortbow, so you don't have to like charge up your shot, you just shoot instantly. That's one of the main things with Arch as well, as you're gonna notice, is that the weapons that you're gonna need are pretty much all gonna be shortbows, purely because of the fact that they do the most damage output the fastest, and it helps you clear the fastest. You're going to want to wear skeleton grunt or skeleton soldier armor. Basically, they're both going to give you like effective HP, like defense and health, and also are going to help you do damage because skeletons. For your pet, you're going to want a skeleton pet, if that wasn't like obvious pretty much. Skeleton pet increases your arrow damage, you gain combos by arrow damage, you have extra crit chance and crit damage. Obviously this is legendary. I recommend you start off with an epic or even like a rare if you really feel like it, because yeah. But pets are very necessary to dungeons, by the way, so you can't go without a pet. It's just not a thing. Another thing is, instead of using the dragon shortbow, you can actually start off by using the machine gun shortbow. This is because it has the ability for rapid fire, and also if you're Iron Man, it's just way easier to get a shortbow, a machine gun shortbow, than it is the dragon shortbow, I'd say. So that's what I'd recommend for F2. Pretty much the same setup, to be honest with you. You can just use the same thing, just upgrade your gear a bit, just, you know, enchant it, dungeonize it. One thing that is really important is your accessory bag, so magical power. So to be honest, the one change you should make between F1 and F2 is just get more magical power in whatever way you can. The more magical power you get, the better you will be at dungeons, because the power stones give you like a lot of buffs. So at earlier magical power, when you're at like, I don't know, 100 or something, the buff won't be that noticeable, but the more you increase your magical power, the more the buff will be noticeable. So I promise you, it's gonna help you a lot. Even if you don't think it will in the beginning, it will. Okay, so for F3, I actually want to make a slight change to the weapon. I want to say that you get a Runan's bow now. So the reason why a Runan's bow, while it's not 100% necessary, technically if you upgrade your dragon shortbow enough, it's still good enough, kind of. I would recommend the Runan's bow purely because of the fact that you get 3 arrows, and 2 of those arrows are homing arrows. So they'll actually shoot the enemy, and you can deal with F3 a bit faster that way, especially, you know, just because of the clears and everything. You get a larger map when you get to F3, so it'll be a bit easier for you. In terms of your armor, I also want to... we're going to swap your armor now. So your leggings and your boots are going to change to adaptive when you get a completion on floor 3. So you're going to get adaptive boots and leggings. Basically, this is because the adaptive set changes your stats depending on the class that you pick. So it's going to be better for Archer. And the top half, you're going to get a Skeleton Master chestplate and helmet. So a Skeleton Master armor, if we have a quick look, essentially it increases the damage you deal with your arrows by 5%. So you get a 10% arrow damage increase, and your bows don't consume any arrows. So that's one of the main perks of the Skeleton Master armor, is that you don't need the full tier bonus. It just applies if you have any piece. Again, this chestplate that I'm showing you right now is a bit extreme. You're gonna want to get a good piece, but not like a 40 mil piece. Okay, let's calm down. Another thing with Archer, actually, that isn't talked about, is there's different kinds of arrows that you can get. So there's like the poison arrows, the sticky arrows, there's explosive arrows that you can get. Archer has different arrows. I personally don't actually know. I think you could just use flint arrows, to be honest, and you'd be fine. I think in master mode, it becomes a lot more of a necessity to use different kinds of arrows. But in lower dungeons, it really doesn't make too much of a difference at all. Flint arrows are just fine. So don't worry about different arrows. You can use bouncy arrows, which I think are quite fun. They just bounce between enemies. You can kind of clear a bit faster with them. But apart from that, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Okay, so I should mention something real quick. You should be using the ender equipment. So between floors 1 and 4, you should really be using the ender equipment that you get from the end. You actually get this equipment before you get the dragon shortbow, so I would just be using that the whole time. It'll make your job a lot easier. You gain extra stats, and equipment is actually something that isn't talked about as much in dungeons anymore, but it's actually quite vital for dungeons, I'd say. I think equipment actually matters quite a lot. So ender equipment, the full set, you get it before you get the dragon shortbow, so highly recommend it. This is like where it starts to, you know, actually change and you get upgrades and damage. So the spirit shortbow, the second you get an F4 completion, you get the spirit shortbow, whether you drop it or you buy it. Spirit shortbow, absolutely need it. It does a lot more damage. It's an upgrade in every way of the word. Yeah, get the spirit shortbow. Upgrade your skeleton pet to legendary at this point, I'd say, because the second you do this, you're not going to have to worry about your pet like any longer. I know it's F4 and it's kind of early, so you might be tight for money, but honestly, you upgrade the skeleton pet to legendary now and you're pretty much good for up until F7. The armor's fine. I would kind of just maybe upgrade the skeleton master chestplate to a better one with more stats, or that was dropped on a higher floor. I would say that, and maybe just give it some more enchants and stuff like that. Again, you should be upgrading your accessory bag as you go, so your magical power should be increasing, so you shouldn't have too much of an issue with that. Now, I would recommend getting into Slayers. So Tarantula Slayer is one that I would definitely say you'd get into, because this will give you the ability to get the Tarantula Helmet. So Slayers are actually a very important thing, especially to dungeons, because it gives you like the ability to unlock different stuff and helping items, but the Tarantula Helmet isn't much of a helping item, especially for Archer. It's actually kind of a necessity, especially because of how much strength you're going to be having and crit damage, and it's just super useful. So I would swap out your helmet now for a Tarantula Helmet. Obviously, you can stick with the same helmet if you don't have the requirements, but I would heavily recommend the Tarantula Helmet. And actually, as a matter of fact, at this point, you can switch your leggings and your boots to strong dragon boots, because now you should be at the kata level where they can be dungeonized. So if you want to dungeonize your like armor by now, I would switch to strong dragon legs and boots, because you actually end up doing more damage and you'll be more tanky. Okay, F5. This is where I would say that one of the first things you should do is actually switch your equipment. So now you're going to be wanting the Shadow Assassin cloak. You're going to be wanting the Rift necklace, Soul Weaver gloves, which actually I don't think you'd have the requirement for Soul Weaver gloves. So you can actually stay with the Ender gloves. And then the adaptive belt. So that's what your equipment should be looking like now. It will help you do a lot more damage, and it's a lot better because they can actually be dungeonized. So I would also recommend dungeonizing your equipment and reforging them, and also not only reforging them but recomming. So as you go, this is for the entire guide. Every single thing that you do, everything should be recommed, dungeonized, enchanted, like everything, starred, and enchanted, reforged. You need to keep upgrading your equipment as long as your magical power. All of this costs money, obviously, so dungeons isn't like a thing that you just get money from by itself. Dungeon is usually paired with another money making method like farming or mining. Of course, if you're lucky enough, that's not a necessity, but it's a high recommendation from me. Also, if you're struggling with defense, you can use the bone necklace actually, because you would have just unlocked it. The only thing is the bone necklace is slightly expensive, and I feel like the rift necklace is fine for now. This is where you unlock Shadow Assassin armor, and this is where you're going to swap to Shadow Assassin armor. So keep the Tarantula helmet, but then switch to 3/4 Shadow Assassin armor. So chestplate, leggings, boots. If you can't afford the Shadow Assassin chestplate, which I hear a lot of people can't at this level, a good strong dragon chestplate is a fine option. You're perfectly fine with that. You can use that and just, like I said, recom star, reforge everything, and keep your equipment the same pretty much. You might be wondering why I haven't mentioned a bow upgrade. So that's because the next bow upgrade that you're going to want to get is actually the Juju short bow. However, if you can't afford the Shadow Assassin chestplate at this level, then you definitely can't afford a Juju shortbow. So you could stick to the Runan's bow and use other methods to try and like up your damage, like your magical power and your reforges and everything. Reforge your armor to fierce or ancient. So that will help you do a lot more damage. Dungeons isn't cheap. Just to clarify, for anyone, dungeons, especially in high kata, is not cheap. Okay, yeah. So now that we get to F6, now you're gonna want to get the Juju shortbow. Now is the time when you get the Juju. So in order to get the Juju shortbow, you need to unlock Enderman Slayer 5, which is not good. Yeah, Enderman Slayer is kind of a pain, but if you pay for a carry, technically 10 tier 4s are good enough to get you to tier 5. So if you want to do it that way, then sure, you can. And then buy the Juju shortbow. So that's going to set you back quite a bit of money. But the second you get the Juju shortbow, to be honest, you can continue using it all the way up until F7 if you really want to. Now is where you want a really good Skeleton Master chestplate that has a lot of tanking, health, defense, and damage. You're also going to want the just full Shadow Assassin armor, pretty much. You can, I mean, I guess you can stick to Tarantula helmet, but I would recommend the full Shadow Assassin armor. If you struggle in the boss room, maybe you can switch to Baby Yeti for better effective HP, because F6 is notoriously known for, it's like a bottleneck pretty much for effective HP, so a lot of people struggle in F6. So I would recommend using something to up your effective HP like a Baby Yeti pet. So also your Power Stone should be on Bloody or Itchy. Another thing you can do is you can put it on Fortuitous, because you're going to need that Power Stone later anyways. So I would recommend putting your Power Stone to one of those three, and basically anything that gives you either damage, strength, or actually the most important thing for Archer is actually crit damage. So crit chance and crit damage you want pretty much constantly. So for the Juju shortbow, you're going to want to reforge it to precise. Obviously you should also get ultimate enchants on like everything, so I would recommend solely to 5 on the Juju. It's just, you know, it's actually pretty good. If you're really rich and you don't think you'll have enough money for a term or the will to play the game for long enough to even get a Terminator, I'd recommend maybe getting Duplex, because yeah, Duplex is just really good for damage overall. So now F7, you want Shadow Assassin Cloak, you want the Rift Necklace, Soul Weaver Gloves, Adaptive Belt. That's your equipment. Now for your armor, you need Necron Leggings and Necron Helmet, a very, very good Skeleton Master chestplate now. Now is when you need to cash out some money on a Skeleton Master chestplate, which has a 50% stat boost, Maxwell boots for not only speed, but also it gives you extra arrow damage. Realistically, you should give them all Legion 5. That's going to be your best enchant for armor. It's going to give you the best damage. Obviously, I think it's blatantly obvious to everyone that if you have the gold head variant of that floor, or the diamond head variant for that floor, you should wear that instead. But if you don't, which I don't think you do, and the reason I didn't mention it is because Skyblock changed the way it works. So now they're co-op soulbound. So pretty much you can't buy them off the AH. Even though a lot of guides might tell you that you need them, I would actually say no, because you need to get 100 completions on that floor to be able to get even just the golden head. So I wouldn't say that it's a complete requirement just to beat the floor. I'd actually say that you should probably just use like normal stuff, and when you get the head, if you end up getting it, then you should use it. Okay, so as for the pet, skeleton, a level 100 skeleton pet is still good enough. However, this is when you get into high levels of dungeons, so yeah, higher kata, this is when you should start thinking about the Ender Dragon pet or the Golden Dragon pet. Both of them extremely viable, extremely good. Obviously, if you have them already, and say you're like new to dungeons, but you're already like Skyblock level 200 and you're rich, just get an Ender Dragon pet, and that will, like, I'm pretty sure with an Ender Dragon pet you can just punch your way through floor 1. Like, you don't even need to really play or optimize your gear. I'm pretty sure you can walk in, punch everything, and win. Okay, so for your weapon, again, like I said, the Juju is like still fine. You can still use the Juju shortbow. However, I would now recommend that you start thinking about upgrading to a Terminator. So the Terminator is an absolutely beast of a weapon. It's the second best weapon in the game. And honestly, when you get this weapon, your life changes for the better. It does so much damage. You destroy so many bosses. It honestly, it helps you so much on F7. Like, you don't realize it, but the amount of damage you do, it's ridiculous. So highly recommend the Terminator. And if you get a Term, you might not even need to change the pet, to be honest. You can just stay with Skeleton Pet. Obviously, if you have a Juju and a Skeleton Pet, you still do quite a bit less damage than if you have an E-Drag or a G-Drag. So, obviously, they're very expensive, so I don't expect you to just get them instantly, but yeah. Okay, so let's get onto the Berserker. So, starting off in F1, so the main job of the Berserker is pretty much to do damage, right? You get a sword, you get good armor, kill things. That's literally your job. That's it. So, for Berserker, for F1, you're going to want just Zombie Soldier armor with Reforged to Fierce. And maybe Strong Dragon armor. If you feel like spending the money for it, it's a good long-term investment. So if you feel like spending the money for it, Strong Dragon armor. If not, Zombie Soldier armor is fine. It's F1. You're not going to stick with it for too much longer. For your weapon, an aspect of the dragon or an aspect of the end is recommended. I would more so say aspect of the dragon is recommended. Early game, I'd say you have a little bit of a choice in pets with Berserk, so you can get an Enderman pet, which I think is kind of just like everyone should really have one. But also you can get a Megalodon pet, which ups your like damage and stuff like that. And a Griffin pet, maybe if you've done Diana enough, you can get a decent Griffin pet, maybe a rare or something, and that will help you do damage as well. So a Griffin pet, not a bad choice. So I would stick with Ender equipment for floor 1. But if you do want to use aspect of the dragon, I would highly recommend a Dragon Fuse glove for later floors. Not for F1. For F1, just use Ender equipment. But for later floors, definitely recommend Dragon Fuse glove, because it ups the damage and the strength while using aspect of the dragon, and it makes the right click ability actually do a lot. It makes the right click ability do a lot less knockback, so you can kind of hit with that. Okay, so floor 2, pretty much the same thing. You're not going to need to change anything. Just, I don't know, enchant your equipment a bit more. No, your equipment. Yeah, just enchant your stuff, man. Just enchant your armor, you know, reforge your equipment, like dungeonize it, whatever. Again, Strong Dragon armor, more recommended on this floor. Okay, so for floor 3, now I would say you get Strong Dragon armor. This is why I would be like, okay, yeah, make the swap to Strong Dragon armor. It's going to help you quite a lot. And yeah, now I would say if you have the money to, again, Dragon Fuse Glove, AOTD, not too much of a big deal. Now I would also suggest swapping to a Lion pet, maybe an Epic, because it's going to help you do a lot more damage. And just in general, overall, you know, pretty good with just everything, really, the Lion pet. As I'm doing this, I'm realizing the Berserker is actually a very simple class, because for F4, just upgrade to a legendary Lion pet. And if you need more EHP, just swap to a Whale pet. But honestly, the Power Stone, which should be bloody, that will pretty much get you through it. And you have a good weapon, good armor. Just keep upgrading your, you know, magical power and reforge, dungeonize, enchant, and you'll do more damage. Now the Dragon Fuse Glove is not like a necessity, but now it really becomes like, it's gonna help you quite a lot more. Okay, in editing this, I actually missed something major, and it's the fact that if you want to use the aspect of the dragons in floor 4 and upwards, I would highly recommend that along with it, you buy superior dragon armor, which boosts the damage of the right click ability of the aspect of the dragon, and it boosts all of your stats by 5%, not to mention that the armor is extremely good, especially when dungeonized. Okay, F5, yeah. Now it's when it starts getting serious. So F5, you want 3/4 Shadow Assassin, 3/4 Shadow Assassin with a good Zombie Knight chestplate. So Shadow Assassin armor, obviously you unlock in floor 5, like I mentioned previously. So this armor, extremely good for Berserk. You get a lot of speed, a lot of damage, you get a lot of just everything. So Shadow Assassin armor, absolute necessity. You can't skip it, there's no alternative. 3/4 Shadow Assassin, if you can afford all 4 pieces of Shadow Assassin armor, even better. But if you can't, then just use a Zombie Knight chestplate. Pretty much the same thing. It's not the same thing. It's worse. But it'll get you through. For the weapon, now is when you want to swap to either a Livid Dagger, which is much more likely for some people, or a Shadow Fury. Now, the Shadow Fury is an amazingly good weapon, where pretty much it's quite expensive though. It's 50 mil. But you right click, you can teleport to mobs, and you do a whole lot of damage. You swing really fast, and you become really fast as well when you hold it. Very highly recommend it. Livid Dagger, obviously that's the more likely weapon. This is an absolute must. you have to get a Livid Dagger at least. Obviously, if you jump to Shadow Fury, that's fine, but Livid Dagger, absolute necessity. Okay, and now for your equipment, now you should swap from Ender Armor to like Rift Necklace, Shadow Assassin Cloak, Soul Weaver Gloves, and Adaptive Belt. But obviously the Soul Weaver Gloves, you're not going to have it locked yet, so just stick with whatever gloves you have now, probably the Dragon Fuse Glove at this point. However, you're not going to need the Dragon Fuse Glove anymore now that you have a Livid. So sell it. Get the 16 mil from the Dragon Fuse Glove, or 15. And yeah, you have some extra money to work with. Maybe you can save up for the Shadow Assassin chestplate now that you've sold the Dragon Fuse Glove, because like I said, it's expensive. But if it helped you between floors 1 to 4, then it should definitely, you know, serve its duty. You can either put it in your museum if you want, or you can just sell it, and you can use the money from that to pretty much just like upgrade your equipment or your armor, and you can now afford a Shadow Assassin chestplate, or a legendary lion pet, or whatever. So floor 6, it's pretty much the same armor, only if you have trouble surviving in the boss room, I would recommend swapping to the baby Yeti pet, because you're going to get more effective HP in the boss room. So for your weapon for F6, now is where I would say that you think about an upgrade. So if you don't want the Shadow Fury, but still want a weapon upgrade, I'd recommend the Felthorn Reaper. I use this weapon in dungeons, and I absolutely loved it. I literally used to be Mage, and I kept dying, and I wasn't sure why, which I'll get onto later. And I switched to the Felthorn Reaper. Honestly, it helped a lot, like a lot. So the Felthorn Reaper, very good weapon, very high damage, and it has a very good right click, which does even more damage. And you can put Soul Eater on it, or if you really want Swarm, if you don't have the money for Soul Eater 5. But Soul Eater 5, highly recommended. Obviously, like I said, again, Recom, Reforge, Enchant, all of your stuff, legendaries, 5 stars, everything, okay? Constantly. Same with your equipment. 5 stars, Reforge, Recom. I don't think you can enchant equipment, but that, okay? If you get a Felthorn Reaper, by the way, you kind of unlock a new pet. So you can now, if you have a Felthorn Reaper, you can technically use the Giraffe pet, which is going to help you a bit more, because the further you are from something, the more damage you're going to do. So now the Giraffe pet is an option for you if you really want to use that. Now it's time for big boy F7. So for F7, you want 3/4 Necron armor with either a Tarantula helmet or a Necron helmet, or just a golden head for the floor that you're doing. That's a necessity, by the way. No skipping that. That's what you need. F7, the second you get completion, 3/4 Necron armor, Tarantula helmet, or just full Necron armor, or 3/4 Necron armor with the golden / diamond head. The Felthorn Reaper is still good enough to be able to clear and to be able to play the game in general. If you want an upgrade, which a lot of people would want, I recommend the Giant Sword. You drop it on F6, it's quite pricey. However, any weapon that you want that's better than the Felthorn is going to be very pricey. So for example, the Dark Claymore is around the same price as the Giant Sword. The only difference is you need a Master Mode 7 completion. And if you want a better weapon, kind of, than the Giant Sword, the Valkyrie, which is one of the variations of the Witherblade, which is going to set you back like, what, 1.7 bill? You know, just a casual 1.7 bill. That's another option for your melee weapon. But again, I wouldn't recommend it, really. I wouldn't recommend it. I just say, if you want to upgrade, stick to the Giant Sword. If you don't for the time being, you can stick to a Felthorn Reaper because it's going to do good enough damage. For your pet, again, you can stick to the Lion Pet because it's a legendary level 100, and yeah, you already have it. However, if you really do want extra damage and stuff, the G-Drag / Ender Dragon Pet, good options. Because they're always going to be good options. They're going to be the best options for just damage and melee damage and just damage in general. You should be getting quite a bit of magical power now, by the way. So if you have enough money to afford a Valkyrie, I would actually recommend that you use that money on magical power, not a Valkyrie. Buy a Giant Sword and then use all of the rest of the money on, okay, not all of the rest of the money, but use it on accessories, up your magical power, because that's when you're going to start doing more damage. And yeah, in general, Berserk, very good in that role, very good for clearing, and just overall actually quite fun to play. Actually, when I started out Berserk, I used the Felthorn Reaper and Shadow Assassin armor. Let me tell you, when I discovered the Felthorn Reaper, it was really fun. So highly recommend it. Now let's get on to the tank. So for the tank, I won't be mentioning the weapon as much because for tank you can do two different like styles. You can pretty much use any melee weapon or range weapon. So just pick one of the weapons from either Berserk or Archer and just use those. Because with tank, I actually want to focus more on the stuff that matters. So while your weapon and your damage does matter, your clearing and stuff doesn't really matter too much until lower floors. So I would recommend just kind of looking at what the Berserk and the Archers used in their respective floors. And I would just kind of copy that really for tank, because that's kind of what you have to do. For armor, you have three choices early on. You can use old dragon armor, heavy armor, or a good set of rotten armor. So all of those are going to do pretty much the same thing, because as a tank, your job is to tank damage. So when someone takes damage and they're close to you, you take the damage. They don't take the damage. So you need armor which is high in defense and health which is going to get you a high effective HP. Pets, you either want an elephant pet or a golem pet, both of which again high EHP. Again, if you already have a better pet like the baby yeti pet or you know something or like the blue whale pet, use that. For power stone, if you want to be tanky and you're not focused on damage, I would say the prepared power stone. That power stone gives you defense and health, so that's going to help you out. For equipment, of course, the ender equipment, I would say for tank it's a lot more like necessary that you get equipment and stuff like that, because the higher your stats and health and defense, the better you'll be at being a tank. For floor 2, old dragon armor is good. I would actually try to stick away from rotten armor. I would maybe more so go for like heavy armor now. Heavy or old dragon armor, both good. I would try to stick away from rotten armor. Obviously, if you've used it for floor 1 and it's worked for you, fine. If it works for you for floor 2, great. But if it doesn't work for you for floor 2, I'd recommend getting old dragon armor or heavy armor. And now you should reforge your armor. So I would reforge it to enforced because that gives more defense. And that's basically all you're gonna need for floor 2. Not much is gonna change in terms of your pets and whatever. For floor 3, you now want heavy armor with the Mender helmet. That's because when you dungeonize the heavy armor, it becomes better than the old dragon armor since you don't have the counter requirement in order to dungeonize it yet. I would always recommend, if you're a tank, to always have a healer with you. If you don't, I'd recommend having healing items with you, which I'll get to later in the video when I finish all the classes. So for floor 3 now, I'd recommend you switch your reforges to perfect. So perfect is going to cost you a little bit, but it's overall better. And yeah, perfect on all your armor. So now in F3, I would recommend starting on a whale pet. Pretty much the whale pet is the final pet you're going to need for tank in terms of tanking things. So a legendary level 100 whale pet you can use all the way up until F7. So if you get started on a whale pet now, so say you get an epic or even a rare, and then you just upgrade it as you play, that's perfect. Like, you're not going to need anything else really. Now for F4, using adaptive armor with the Mender Fedora is an option. It's just not a very good option. While that's a thing, I'd actually recommend that you get old dragon armor, that you dungeonize, and you upgrade, because it's better. Now for F5, now you do need old dragon armor. Now is when you need old dragon armor with a Mender Fedora with perfect reforges. This is where I realized I forgot to explain this. One of the most important slayers for tank, actually the most important slayer for tank, is Zombie Slayer. So Revenant Slayer, pretty much the reason why is because you get all of the good healing items from Zombie Slayer, and also you get an item called the Reaper Mask. Now the Reaper Mask is extremely good for tank, and in fact you use it all the way up to F7 because it increases your vitality and your mending, which is extremely good for use of healing items and for having a healer, which is just, and it gives very good health and defense for tank, which the Mender items actually don't do. They don't give any defense, they just give health, but they give you a lot of mending. So I would recommend, if you can, around this level now, get a Reaper Mask. It's expensive, but it is a long-term investment and it is worth it. And also on this floor now is when I'd recommend, yeah, get a legendary blue whale pet in preparation for floor 6. And floor 5 also isn't that easy to tank all of Livid's damage either. However, I would actually say in some ways that F5 is actually easier than F4 because you're not going to be having to tank as much, and your Berserks, archers, mages, and whatever are going to be able to take a lot more single target damage and do a lot more single target damage. So Livid should be dead quite quickly. So you shouldn't have to worry really about tanking too much. If you do, then I would recommend basically exactly what I said with Old Dragon Armor, Legendary Whale Pet. And also another thing for F5 now is when you should have the Bone Necklace, along with, like, you know, like I mentioned previously, you should have the Shadow Assassin Cloak and Adaptive Belt. The necklace, the Bone Necklace, is genuinely the most important equipment piece for tank. It's very expensive, but it's, again, you use it all the way up to F7. And the reason why it's so good is not only does it give you extra defense and health, but also it upgrades the range at which you can tank damage from people. So it helps to save your teammates a lot better, especially at higher kata levels. So highly, highly, highly recommend the Bone Necklace. For F6, we're swapping pretty much everything. So Old Dragon Armor, bye-bye. You use a Reaper Mask and 3/4 Necromancer Lord Armor. Now the Reaper Mask is absolutely necessary. You need the mending, the health, and the defense from the Reaper Mask, as well as the 3/4 Necromancer Lord Armor, which help with effective HP quite a lot. Actually, they provide quite a lot of defense and health, and yeah, you're gonna need them. And obviously, just reforge them to perfect. Now, of course, you need the legendary blue whale pet, like level 100, and yeah, F7. So Reaper Mask, and now you're getting rid of Necromancer Lord Armor for 3/4 Goldor Armor. So Goldor Armor, the most tanky armor in the game. I'm going to show you right now my setup. So Reaper Mask, 3/4 Goldor. Reforged Goldor to Giant, and my Reaper Mask is on Ancient, which just helps with a little bit extra damage, which you don't really need. This is basically the armor you're going to be using for tanking F7. This is the final setup. Reaper Mask really going to help you with healing and mending and everything, and Goldor Armor really good for tanking. There is no substitute. Reforger to Giant, all perfect. So for your weapon for tank, this is where it slightly deviates. So of course you can still copy everything else, that's fine. Only difference is that now you can also pair it with an Astria. So an Astria is another variant of the Wither Blades, but this one is specifically focused around defense, with the highest possible Astria providing you with 350 defense, which is crazy. And I would also put Wither Shield on it if you can, which is one of the one of the 3 scrolls that drops from F7. Wither Shield is just going to help you tank more damage. Again, the whole thing with tank is tanking damage, so your armor is very important. And yeah, by now you also want the Soul Weaver gloves, just to, you know, just to clarify. That's it for the tank specific setup, but what I would say is when you get to higher kata like F6 and F7, I would actually recommend having 2 sets of armor or 2 sets of gear. So one I would call the clearing armor. So that's basically everything to do with like killing the mobs and killing the mini bosses and just clearing the room. Because one thing with tank is the armor doesn't give you any speed. So if your reforge is on prepared and whatever, and your tuning points are on, let's say like defense or health, you're not going to be getting any speed and your clears are going to be very slow. So if you want to help your teammates, I would recommend getting like a full set of Necron armor and just like a sword, like a Felthorn or a Shadow Fury or something. And just a pet, like a lion pet, and just run around and clear. And then in the boss room, and switch to your armor, to your tank armor and your gear. That's going to help you a lot. This isn't as pertinent in lower kata levels because the maps are smaller, so 4 people should be able to clear it just fine. Obviously, you get faster clears if the tank helps, but again, you don't have to help. It's just recommended that you do. We have the Mage. So on floor 1 with the Mage is one thing I'm going to tell you right now is the Mage is going to be very, very squishy. So that means you're going to take a lot of damage from mobs. So pretty much anything you can do to not only do damage with your mana, but also make sure you survive is the best thing that you can do, which is what I'm going to try and help you with now. So for floor 1, again, you don't need too much for floor 1. A Dreadlord Sword has a good right click and explosion damage, so a Dreadlord Sword works. Wise Dragon Armor with the Wise Reforge on it. Just going to get you quite a lot of mana. So something that I will say is the pet that I have right now, that you can see, the sheep pet, I say just start with that, to be honest. Just as early as you can, get the pet that gives you the most intelligence. I don't see why you wouldn't. Even if it's like a rare, just start with that and then upgrade it to a legendary. Just start with the best pet early on, and then you literally don't have to worry about the pet for the rest of the game. The only other pet that I could possibly think that you could get is the Guardian pet, But again, no point in getting the Guardian when you're going to switch to a sheep later on anyways. So just get the sheep hat. Again, and their equipment. And for your Power Stone, you're going to want Inspired. Now, if I wasn't banging on about the accessory bag before, now is the time. Because Mage is not a cheap class. Mage is extremely expensive. And especially because one of the main sources you get your mana is from magical power. Because magical power is extremely important to the Mage, as you can not only up your intelligence, you also up your mana, and Inspired is one of those like buffs that gives not only mana, but it also gives ability damage, which is exactly what a Mage needs. So the higher your magical power, the higher your mana, the higher damage, the higher everything. Okay, for floor 2, everything is the same. The only difference is now you want a Bonzo Staff. So again, you can stick to a Dreadlord Sword. It's not really going to make too much of a difference. But the Bonzo Staff is going to be a bit better because you're going to be doing a lot more damage. You can pretty much 1-tap or 2-tap anything in floor 2. And yeah, you might struggle a little bit with dying. Like, things might still hit you and kill you. But yeah, just try to avoid mobs as much as you can, really. Just try and shoot them from a distance. And yeah, that's pretty much it for floor 2. Just use all the same things. Now for floor 3, you're going to want a bit more effective HP. So you're going to switch to 3/4 adaptive armor with shadow goggles. So essentially, well, dark goggles and shadow goggles if you can use them. If you want now, if you have the money to, I would put necrotic on your armor to give you extra intelligence and extra mana. Because again, adaptive armor, even though it is adaptive to the Mage, it's not going to give you as much mana as White Dragon armor would. So I'd recommend reforging everything to necrotic. If you want, you can put loving on the chest plate. Again, I'd still recommend just necrotic though. And as for your weapon in floor 3, so you can still stick to the Bonzo Staff. However, I would recommend maybe switching to the Frozen Scythe now. The Frozen Scythe is quite good because it not only applies the freezing effect, but it has a lower mana cost, and it's just quite a good upgrade, to be honest. Now we get on to F4, and this is where being a Mage starts to get really tricky. So F4 is known for having a notoriously difficult and explosive boss room. Again, another weapon upgrade I would recommend is the Spirit Scepter. So the Spirit Scepter, very, very good weapon and does a lot of damage. For your equipment, I would recommend now swapping to a Balloon Snake and an adaptive belt. I don't think you'll be able to afford like Shadow Assassin Cloak yet, but I would recommend swapping to those two at least. If you struggle to live because you're using adaptive armor, and adaptive armor is quite doo-doo, to be honest, maybe use super heavy armor and reforge it to necrotic because it has a lot of effective HP and maybe it could help you out. But with the Spirit Scepter, it uses a lot of mana, so I would be careful with mana conservation when using the Spirit Scepter, especially when it comes to using super heavy armor and reforging it to necrotic. I wouldn't even recommend using loving on the chestplate purely because of the 30 extra intelligence drop. Again, while you should be upgrading your accessory bag, you still, like, you know, it's still quite a tough thing to be Mage at lower levels. Like, that's why I just recommend playing Berserk until you can play Mage, or playing Archer until you can play Mage. But to be completely honest with you, Mage is just not fun until, like, I don't know, like full 6 and 7. That's where Mage gets fun. But before that, it's just kind of like, eh. For floor 5, I'd say maybe you can upgrade to a Glacial Scythe because of the lower mana requirement, it's going to do not only more damage than the Spirit Scepter, but also you can use it more often. Your armor and your equipment and everything pretty much going to be the exact same thing. Okay, getting on to F6, I think this is the first time I haven't told you to swap your weapon. So you can still stick with the same weapon actually, but now you're going to swap your armor to 3/4 Necromancer Lord armor with preferably Wither goggles, but Shadow goggles if you really have to. So Necromancer Lord armor is actually known for providing effective health and defense, which is really good for Mage. So reforge that to necrotic, and now is when you can actually play the game without just getting one-tapped by everything. Yeah, you still use the sheep pet, everything, but now your reforges should be looking a lot better. Now you can put some tuning points back into speed, and you know, you can actually help clear with your teammates. Obviously now you can get the Soul Weaver gloves, so yeah, get that. Okay, F7, throw everything out the window. Everything you knew except for the pet is changing now. So armor It's changing from 3/4 Necromancer Lord to 3/4 Storm Armor. This armor is not, it's much more better in terms of tankiness, but this armor actually provides you with like intelligence and like actual good stats. So now you use Wither Goggles and 3/4 Storm Armor, and now you're good. Now you can play the game, okay? Now is when it gets fun. Because now, in F7, you should also upgrade your weapon from a Glacial Scythe to a Hyperion. Now, like I said, Mage ain't cheap. So the Hyperion, literally the best weapon in the game. As you can see, for what my hype right now, is it gives you 656 intelligence. The main use of the Hyperion is its ability Wither Impact. So when you put all 3 scrolls on the Hyperion, basically you get a Hyperion by, it's one of the Wither Blade variations. Combine it with 3 scrolls and you get Wither Impact, which basically allows you to do this. You teleport forward, it causes an explosion around you, and you make a shield for yourself, which is very, very useful for tanking damage. And yeah, things can still kill you, but you can kill them a lot faster than they can kill you. So you basically shouldn't be worried about that at all. You should also get an implosion belt. So if you're playing as Mage, you should definitely get an implosion belt. It's going to do more damage to weapons that basically do explosion damage, which your Hyperion does. So implosion belt, absolutely necessary. Another Mage weapon that I've heard helps is the Midas Staff, like a maxed out Midas Staff. It's expensive. It's not expensive as a Hyperion, but that stuff does quite a lot of burst and single target damage. So I highly recommend it if you don't have a hype. I don't even have the Midas Staff myself, to be honest. For me, it's not useful right now, but for a lot of people, could be useful. And yeah, that's literally the Mage. That's the Mage guide. So you might be wondering, why did I miss out a role? And that role is Healer. Now, the thing with Healer is that Healer's job is literally just to heal. So you can actually use any armor that you want and from any of the classes that I mentioned and just substitute the word Healer and any weapon as well. That's the good thing about Healer. Just play any armor, anything, because your job is to heal, but you do that with your abilities. So there isn't anything really that helps you heal your teammates. You can obviously use tank armor to help you stay alive and to get more health, but apart from that, like in terms of weapon and armor, you can just play whatever the hell you want. That's the good thing about Healer. You're literally like a kit that's a hybrid. You can play Mage Healer, you can play Berserk Healer, you can play Arch Healer, you can even play Tank Healer if you feel like it. You're not going to take any damage. Yeah, that's why Healer's great. So pretty much this is a 4-role guide because I covered Healer in covering all 4 roles before it. Pretty much play however you want. What I want to mention with dungeons is that there's a lot more to it than just the 5 roles. So what I mean by this is that one thing that you should also keep in mind is that throughout dungeons, there's a lot of weapons and tools that can help you that I think every class should have. That's why Slayers are so important. So I think every single class should have at least some sort of bow, whether it's the machine gun bow or the juju or whatever, or just some short bow, purely because one of the puzzle rooms is going to require you to use, actually 2 of the puzzle rooms require you to use a bow. Another thing that I would recommend is the Florid Zombie Sword. So the Florid Zombie Sword basically is this sword. When you right click it once, it heals you for a burst of health. Whenever you take damage, you use up a little bit of mana, but honestly, very worth it. Next up is the Bonzo Mask. So the Bonzo Mask is dropped from floor 1, and whenever you put it on, if you die, you don't die. Like, it saves you an entire life, and it brings you back up to full health. So Bonzo Mask actually very, very useful for just, yeah, dungeons in general. I would say highly recommend using the Bonzo Mask whenever you think that you don't have enough tanking ability or like health to survive something. I would just heavily recommend using the Bonzo Mask. Just throw it on. It'll pop you back up to full health, give you temporary immunity and replenish your health. Then you can throw your helmet back on and continue. Another thing really important for dungeons is the Bonzo Staff. So even though the Bonzo Staff technically is one of the Mage weapons, that's not all it's used for. So something else that the Bonzo Staff is used for on specifically floor 7 and Master Mode 7 is movement. So the Bonzo Staff doesn't do any explosion damage to you if you look, but what it will do is bounce you backwards, as you can see. So you can use it as movement to do stuff like this. You can kind of launch yourself across gaps. As you can see, I started there and boom, launches me across. I don't have to jump. Actually, I can just do this. It launches you across gaps. So very, very useful for movement. As in floor 7 in the boss room, your movement abilities are actually disabled. Speaking of movement abilities, next thing I want to get onto is the aspect of the void / aspect of the end. These two things help you teleport around, so highly recommend them. One thing you can also do is put transmission tuners on them. So you drop them from Enderman Slayer, but they're actually very cheap. I think you can buy them from the bazaar. It used to be the auction house, so I think it's the bazaar now. But basically, you drop transmission tuners and put them on your aspect of the void or aspect of the end. You can teleport further distances. And the most important thing is the Ether Warp Conduit. Basically, it requires you to have Enderman Slayer 6 to actually apply this, but you can use it without having Enderman Slayer 6. You can just buy it off the auction house. Essentially, Ether Warp Conduit, whenever you shift click, it will allow you to pick a block to teleport to. And you have this within like a 61 block range, which is really good because this is especially good for clearing and for secrets. So if there's a secret across the room, you just boom and you're right there. Next up is the power orbs that you get from Sven Slayer. So there's the Radiant Power Orb, the Mana Flux, the Overflux, and the Plasma Flux. Which basically you're gonna want the Overflux, but the Plasma Flux is also an option. So the ability of the Overflux I'll go over is it grants 100% base mana regen. It heals you for 2.5% of your max health per second. It grants you extra vitality and mending, and it gives you strength. That's why I think for tanks, this stuff isn't really a recommendation. It's actually more of a necessity because you're going to be wanting to tank damage and you're going to be wanting to heal yourself. Another thing I'd recommend for tank is the Wand of Atonement, which again you get from Zombie Slayer. So that's another healing item, but it does healing over time rather than burst healing. And pair it with the Florid Zombie Sword and an Overflux, and you should be fine on healing. Another useful thing is the Jingle Bells. So this is again mainly used for tank, but you right click this and all mobs, well, you can just read the thing. Every mob in a 10 block radius basically targets you, and you can steal aggro away from the withers from your teammates, but also if you want to use it for the terracottas on F6, that's also an option. Very useful. So the Wither Cloak is another one of the support items. You right click the Wither Cloak and it puts a protective field around you. Nothing can hurt you when this is happening, although it does use your mana, so it'll take up 20% of your mana every time a hit is blocked. And you also can't do damage while your Wither Cloak is up, and it has a 10-second cooldown. So you can use it to basically, if you're getting low and you've already popped your Bonzo Mask, just right click the Wither Cloak and it'll save you for at least a little bit of time so that you can heal up or whatever. Okay, so I don't know how I missed this during editing, but there's actually quite a few support items that I missed. So one of the support items that I missed was the Jerry Sheen Gun. Essentially, the Jerry Sheen Gun is used by mages and it's a movement exclusive, and it's pretty much exclusive to M7 and F7 because you're not going to want to use it outside of floor 7 because no other floor is going to require it. Essentially, it allows you to climb up the walls and it uses quite a bit of mana, which is why usually the mages use it for getting the crystals in F7. The other support items is just regular ender pearls. The reason why is because there's an orange room in the actual dungeon room that you're going to want to clear pretty quickly, but in the room your teleport abilities and movement abilities are completely disabled. However, ender pearls do still work inside of it, so you can use that to traverse the room. The third support item that I should have mentioned is the chest. Now, when I say chest, I mean completely regular vanilla Minecraft chest. The reason why is when you jump in the lava in F7 and you right click on the floor just in time, it will actually give you a super bounce for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It's just a glitch. We don't know why it happens, but it's a very useful movement ability. So that's another support item that you can use for F7. The other two support items that I missed are again more F7 based, but they're also kind of M7 based in the way that they're only really used for the Berserk in I4 and maybe the archer when he's doing early enter. The two items are actually the Phoenix Pet because he provides temporary immortality, and the Spirit Mask, which you get from the Dark Auction, which also provides temporary immortality similar to the Bonzo Mask but has a way shorter cooldown, so it's really useful in floor 7, and actually it can be useful in more floors than just floor 7. The only thing is that it's not really used outside of floor 7 because people don't die that often in lower floors, and if they do, they can't afford the Spirit Mask, and if they could, they would just buy gear to make themselves stronger instead of using the Spirit Mask. Now I'm gonna get into actual dungeons, like actually explaining to you what dungeons is and how it plays. Dungeons, you get in and you get a map where there's a bunch of different rooms that spawn in, and a bunch of different mobs spawn in those rooms. When you're clearing the rooms, there are certain mobs which have a star above their, like next to their name, above their head. And when you kill all of those mobs in a specific room, they will drop the wither key. So this isn't for every single room. There's like one specific path which leads to the wither door. Every time you drop a wither key, you can unlock the wither door. And when you unlock enough wither doors, you essentially get to the final room, the blood room. So you kill the mob and it drops the blood key. You unlock the blood room and it will start spawning a bunch of mobs which are meant to challenge you, and you kill them. When you kill all of the blood room, you can walk through and go into the boss room. Now, dungeons is basically based around scoring. So you have scores. The most important scoring is 270 and 300. So 300 score is you get S+, 270 score you get S rank. The scores indicate what chest you get at the end of a dungeon run. So the whole point of dungeons is you get chest rewards at the end. The higher your score, the better the chest you're able to unlock. So for S rank, you're able to unlock the obsidian chest, and from floor 5 upwards, a rank of 300 allows you to unlock the bedrock chest, where you have the best rewards. 270 score you can get through clearing pretty much all the rooms, but in some floors you're also required to do secrets. So every single room in dungeons, with the exception of a few, have a secrets in them. So whenever you clear a room, meaning you kill all the starred mobs in that room, so the mobs with the stars on their head, which some mods can actually highlight for you to help you out. When you kill all of them, you get a white tick for the room. That means you've cleared the room. That's what we call clearing. Whenever you get all the secrets and you clear the room, it becomes a green tick. That means you've completed the room. So the difference is that you get more score per completion of the room. The way to get 300 score, during Paul, it's actually way easier to get 300 score. But when Paul's not mayor, actually, you need to do almost all of the secrets in the whole floor pretty much. And like green tick almost every single room pretty much to be able to get to 300 score, which is why clearing is really important. So one thing that you learn quite early on in dungeons, but quite a few Kata 30s don't even know, is that you do your clears before your secrets. So you always clear the rooms before you do secrets. That way you maximize the dungeon score that you get per run, because then you need to get less secrets, and secrets take longer than clearing. So one tip for clearing is that the mobs will always spawn in the same place every time for every single room. So while the mob itself might be different, it'll usually be some kind of variation of the same mob. So say if it's like a zombie, it might be a different variation of zombie, but it will still be a zombie in that place. And they will usually always spawn in the same place in each room. Obviously, if you're in the room for quite a while, they can chase you and move around. And sometimes they even run out of the room, which is really annoying. Hypixel, please fix it. The mobs will always spawn in the same place. So if you play dungeons enough, you can actually learn where all the mobs spawn. And that will make your clearing for the floors and the rooms a lot faster. So for example, I've actually memorized most of the rooms where the mobs spawn. So when I'm clearing, I just go straight to there, as well as just normal rooms. In dungeons, you're gonna get puzzle rooms which you need to complete. So puzzle rooms usually don't tend to have secrets, apart from the blaze room, which does have one secret. But each puzzle room is essentially like a different mini game. So there's tic-tac-toe, and then there's one where you have to get the water to fill in all the holes to open the door, to open all the doors that is required. And when you do that, you get a chest, you complete the room, you get out. And there's also the final type of room, apart from, you know, whatever, is yellow room, which is the mini boss room. Literally all there is inside is just one mini boss. He's quite strong, and you kill him, you green tick the room, you move on. Fairly simple. I could talk about every single floor in order, but I don't think I'll do that because you can just play it yourself and see. The only thing I'm going to talk about is F7, because that's the only time where the roles for each class actually change. One thing that you will notice is that if you look at Party Finder for dungeons, a lot of the time for F7, people will ask for tank. Now, why they'll ask for tank is because in floor 7, the tank essentially, his job is to drag Maxor to the laser. The rest are supposed to get the crystals, whatever, but also the tank does a lot of tanking. And when you get into Goldor phase, without a tank, you actually take a lot of damage from the lava. Like half of your health just vanishes. With a tank, you take barely any damage from the lava, actually. So very useful to have a tank. But if you're a bit of a higher catter, one thing you might see quite often is something either M7R or M7 rolls. And M7 rolls are a completely nuanced and different way that you play F7, because it assumes that every person has enough pretty much survivability and everything to be able to live, and they each have their own individual roles, which they do, which I'm actually going to explain. Okay, so for M7 roles, the first room that you do is Maxor. So the tank's job is to drag away Maxor and bring him to the laser and just keep him there, where the Mage and the Berserk get the other crystal. So they each get a crystal each. So they can pick whether they want left crystal or right crystal, that's up to them. The Archer pretty much clears and does DPS if needed for the time being, while the Healer isn't even involved in this situation, because the second that Maxor room opens, the Healer begins something known as pre-dev. Now, what is pre-dev? So one thing you may know about the boss room of F7 is it's split up into 4 sections where you fight the 4 Wither Lords. Goldor is the 3rd room, but pre-dev essentially allows the Healer to complete devices 2 and 3 before the others enter the Goldor phase. So they'll be doing pre-dev while this is going on. They break down with the chest through the bottom of the Maxor stage. They drop down into where Storm would be, and then they break through the wall to go into the Goldor phase. The reason I didn't mention this up until now is another item that is required, pretty much required for F7, is the Stonk, which is a pickaxe which has a lot of mining speed. Pretty much what this will do is you have a lot of mining speed, and there's something called Ghost Pick. So what Ghost Picking is if you look, when I hover over the pickaxe and say I have my diffuse kit, if I press 6 and 5 really quickly, it creates a ghost item in my inventory. So then I can break blocks, and the blocks are like gone, but they're not actually gone. They're glitched. Those blocks, they're there, they just vanished. That's really useful, especially for the Healer, where you actually need an efficiency 10 pickaxe, an efficiency 10 diamond pickaxe, in order to be able to do pre-dev. And yeah, for the rest, I would recommend the Stonk just for secrets, but for the Healer, I would specifically recommend an efficiency 10 diamond pickaxe for pre-deving. Now what happens is the Mage and the Berserk have gotten the crystals, and Maxor is now getting hit by the laser, and one of 2 things can happen. One, no one does damage to him, and the tank can just do enough damage to get him to half health, which doesn't enrage Maxor and gives enough time for the Mage and the Berserk to get the crystals from left and right. Then they can do it, then you can kill Maxor without actually enraging him, so the tank doesn't even really take that much damage. The second thing that can happen is the Mage and the Berserk get the crystals, Maxor gets hit by the laser, and the Archer does enough damage to enrage him. Now, when he gets enraged, he does an insane amount of damage, which is why it's really important he stays with the tank. However, even with this gear, the tank won't be able to stay alive, even with the Florid Zombie Sword. So the second that Maxor enrages, the Healer wishes. And the wish is going to fill up everyone's health, especially the tank. And when the tank goes above max HP, they're going to be able to tank the entirety of the enrage from Maxor. And with some well-timed Florid Zombie Sword right clicks. As the crystals go off on the second phase, the Archer is going to dig down through the floor, similar to how the Healer did it, which is called early 2. So early 2, essentially you enter stage 2 a little bit early. It saves maybe 2-3 seconds of time, and everyone can get ready and start clearing the Wither Skeletons. Now the Berserk has his own rule called I4 or pre-4, I4 standing for instant 4. Essentially, as soon as Storm starts, the Berserk goes through the wall and goes to join the Healer so he can start pre-4. So what does pre-4 actually mean? Essentially, pre-4 is the act of completing the 4th device before the rest go there. So he starts he starts I4 as Storm starts, and then I4 is pretty much finished when everyone else enters Goldor. So if you're wondering about the pads, there's 2 different variations of pads you can do. You can do purple pad and yellow pad, or green pad and yellow pad, which is what 99% of people will do. Green pad essentially entails when Storm does his lightning thing, does 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The healer with the cloaks so he doesn't take any damage from the lightning. Then the healer leaps up to one of the other players and goes to do green pad. So the mage is actually the one who's meant to take aggro on Storm, because the mage beam from the left click is extremely useful for attracting the boss, because it does damage, a lot of damage, and also you can shoot it from very far away. And it's basically hit scan, so there's no travel time really. The healer stomps, stands on the pad, and the pillar crushes Storm. As that happens, the healer bundle staffs across to the middle platform and runs down and goes back to pre-deving. So basically this is done so that they can go to the first device and they can stand there, which is called SS camp, because the first device is known as Simon Says. While this is happening, the Berserker is still doing I4, so instead the tank actually goes on yellow pad. So the mage and the archer run across, the tank stomps him, and then what they all do is they all spirit leap to the healer, who should be standing at Simon Says. Now the alternative version of this is purple pad and yellow pad. Essentially purple pad is where the tank actually goes to purple pad and stomps Storm by himself, so the healer doesn't even have to leap up really. And then the archer can actually do yellow pad, the mage drags him, and then they all teleport to the healer, who's already SS camping, so they don't have to worry about doing green pad. So when they start, everyone in Goldor has their own terminals designated to them. Let's say you do have an I4. The tank does terminals 1 and 2 on the first stage, and then terminal 1 through all the other stages. The archer does levels 1 and 2 on the first stage, and then does terminal 4 throughout the whole rest of the stages. In the first thing, the mage does terminal 3 and then does 2 throughout all the other stages. And the Berserk doesn't do any terminals because they're actually doing I4. So the only difference is that if they get back from I4 early, they do 3. They do terminal 3, which they should do after the first thing. After the first stage, they should be done with I4, and then they can do terminals 3 in stage 2, 3, and 4. Terminal 5, I'm not actually sure who does. I think it's just whoever gets there first. Another thing that happens is with Archer, he does something called early enter 2. So when you're done with stage 1, the Archer will actually break through the gate and will go into stage 2 a bit early, so everyone can leap to him before the gate actually fully blows up. So as the gate blows up, you leap to him, so you're already in the middle of the stage, essentially making it way easier for you to get to your terminals. If you're tank, that's not going to concern you too much because your terminal is always 1, so you're always right next to the gate. However, if you're all the other classes, it's a lot makes a lot more sense for you to leap to the archer. The healer always does the devices, so the healer doesn't have a designated terminal, because doing pre-dev, yeah, you do the devices, and then I guess the healer can do the levers, which is probably what the healer does anyways. The levers are kind of just who gets to them first, but yeah, usually the healer does them. For device 4, if you have an I4, it's already done for you, so you don't have to worry. It's literally just 4 terminals, 2 levers, you go in. One thing that can happen is you can do early core enter, so the healer or the mage actually breaks through and goes to the core, and when you've done all 4 terminals and the levers, you can leap to him and he's already in the core, so you don't have to run all the way in to the golden door. You just teleport to them like spirit leap, and then you're there. That's pretty much how it should go with them 7 rules. The only thing I missed is instant middle, which you don't actually need to do at all. It's not necessary, but it's just kind of a fun thing that you can do. If you have a Shadow Fury, after you kill after you kill Goldor, you can actually right click your Shadow Fury and you'll teleport to the middle where Necron is. I actually did it in my dungeons video by complete accident. Thank you to whoever pointed it out in the comments. But I actually did instant mid by complete accident. And I guess the only use of it is that you can pretty much damage Necron as soon as he's already in the middle. So Necron will always start in the middle, so you won't even give him a chance to move away from the middle if you do enough damage. So that's like the main perk essentially of that. Yeah. Okay. Once again, I missed 3 different things that I wanted to mention in editing. I promise this is the last thing. Anything else that I want to add is going in the description. Okay, thing number one is that if you are still struggling with stats, so for example, if you're a mage but still lacking in mana, if you're a tanking lacking in defense, if you're an archer and a berserk and you're lacking in crit chance and damage, or just if you're any class and you're lacking in health, I would recommend increasing your base skyblock stats. So for example, increasing your combat level gives you extra crit chance, increasing your mining level gives you extra defense, increasing like carpentry, farming and some other stuff increases your health. Increasing alchemy and enchanting not only gives you intelligence, but it also gives you ability damage. And yeah, that's basically it. And increasing your foraging gives you strength, which again, you might not want to do foraging because it's the worst skill out there. But if you do want extra strength, honestly, I recommend it. If you don't have the money to upgrade your accessory bag that much, there are other ways that you can upgrade your stuff without needing to use the accessory bag and the magical power for base stats. The second way to increase your base stats in terms of things, just adding like mana or strength or whatever, is actually using gemstones. So gemstones, obviously from mining, have base perks within each gemstone. So for example, onyx gives you crit damage, or like for example, the ruby gives you health and etc. Down the line, sapphire gives you intelligence. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, so I won't include them right now. But I just wanted to make you aware that that is an option. You can put gemstones on your stuff. The higher the tier of gemstone, the more stats you'll get. And some items might not even have that option, but some items that do will help you out in the long run. The last thing I wanted to mention is actually simply the fact that dungeons, I would not say is easy. And a lot of things in dungeons aren't easy. So you may come across some Skyblock players or whatever that say, oh, this is so easy, man. No, this is easy. Pre-dev is easy. I4 easy. And I just want to say that not everything is going to be easy for everyone. So if something isn't easy to you, don't feel ashamed or don't feel like there's something wrong with you that you can't do it, or just say, oh, I'm skill issued. It's not easy, and not everything in Skyblock is easy. So if there's something that you can't do, you don't have to do it. And don't feel pressured to do it by people who can. Just because they say that it's easy and they find it easy doesn't mean that it is for everyone. I think that concludes the dungeon guide. I think that's pretty much everything I can teach you from what I know. There might be some stuff that I've missed. Essentially, that's it. I think I've told you literally everything that I know. If you guys do have any remaining questions, or if you have any suggestions, put them down in the comments below and let me know if I missed anything, or, you know, like whatever. And let me know if you enjoyed the video. Leave a like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to stay posted on when I upload, because sometimes when you subscribe to someone, they don't put it on your recommended. So if you want to watch my videos more, I'd recommend hitting the notification button so you're actually notified on YouTube when I upload my next video. Thank you guys very much for watching. This video was extremely long and my voice is dying. So I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.